And we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What is up, guys? This is Nick on the P2W Fantasy Podcast. Really excited about this show today. Two great guests, two guests I have not collaborated with at all, and I'm very excited to have both of them on at once here discussing Week 13. So before we get into anything fantasy football related, I want to make sure that I introduce both of my guests here, let them talk about themselves because both of them have a lot going on. We'll kick things off here. So to start things off, I have Julia with me. Julia's a writer for the Fantasy Footballers, and I just looked today. You do the show recaps, so they put out the podcast, and you just break it down in an article form. So something I actually didn't know about. And there's times where I might have missed something because that's a podcast I often listen to. So if I do miss something, I can kind of read through the SparkNote version of it, and that's what you do. You have your own website as well. Lengthy resume as a hairstylist with some awesome stuff on there. I do my research on my guests, so I went on there and I clicked the resume and I saw it. I'm like, oh my God, that is awesome. But you have a lot going on, a lot of different interests and hobbies. Can you tell everybody first and foremost where to find you on social media, and then a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. Just Julia Papworth, my first name, my last name. I do a lot of stuff. I'm very interested in a lot of things. I live out in LA, like you said. I'm a hairdresser. I work on the TV shows, and I love football and write for the Fantasy Footballers. Those guys are amazing, and it's been such a wonderful opportunity doing that for them. And do a lot of CrossFit. That's pretty much my life.
That is awesome. Yeah. I do the hashtag like fantasy football fit club. It was like a thing for a while on Twitter that kind of died out, but I'm still randomly doing it on there. So I got that same sort of interest.
You're always at the gym so early.
Yeah. And just in front of everybody. It's always so crowded when I'm there. But also with me today, I got Justin. Justin, you're involved with Just Hoop Talk. But the one thing I want to bring up is the Fantasy Gods, which is awesome. What you guys do on TikTok. You guys are on Twitter as well, and I know that you guys have a Twitch, a YouTube, and a Discord. But TikTok specifically, 23.9 thousand followers on there.
Wow.
Yes,
you
sir.
Guys, I try to post some, most of my content's on Twitter, but I try to post on TikTok. But you guys are by far my favorite account on there. You guys don't just have, fantasy football info. You guys have a lot of humor. You guys give advice. You guys do live streams. So big fan, man. Big fan of what you guys do there. Can you let everybody know where we can find you on social media? And then, again, what you're up to?
Yeah, yes, sir. Justin Henry with the 3 instead of the E in the Henry. And yes, on Fantasy Gods, you can catch me on FanDuel. You can catch me on Just Hoop Talk, talking football, basketball, love sports. And so that's always been a big passion of mine. I'm in marketing, and so I have a marketing company and started a sports marketing company, Emerge Sports Group. But with that came, just talking about it all the time. We started the podcast, Just Hoop Talk podcast. Started talking with my friends. The next season was fantasy football. And it's like, I kind of have a knack for knowing, a little bit about how to get the message out there. And so for TikTok, we went out there and less than 6 months ago, we started, and it just happened. Like we caught, a few viral videos and took off, man. So we try to provide not just some of the funny, but then some of the real stuff too. And I think that we bridge the gap between like just being overly analytical with, a little, or just humor, and kind of merging that together and giving people a realistic chance to get information on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I do like that mixture of things. It's not like you guys are just a humor account, or you guys are just breaking down film or something like that. You got a good mixture of everything. So again,
yes, sir.
Big fan. Glad to have both you guys on the show today. Should be a good one. Before we get into anything, I do want to say, as always, the show is partnered up with the Fantasy Points Media Group. Go check out fantasypoints.com. It's a one-stop shop for literally everything you're looking for: articles, rankings, projections. They have streaming videos. They have everything you need right now, and it's a major discount just because we are through week 13. But you can use the discount because of the timing of the year, and my promo code 21WIN10. And if you are in the fantasy playoffs, go check it out because it'll be very useful. All right, if you are listening live, stick with us. We are going to recap Week 13 and kind of look forward here. It's going to be a good show.
Play to win, no fear to give. I feel but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Oh, play to win, I play to win. Yeah, play to win, I play to win.
All right. So first topic from Week 13. We'll start with some positives here. So my question. There was a lot of negatives this week too, between injuries and some bad scoring. But positives. Which performance from Week 13 do you guys think was a positive sign for the rest of the season? So they had a good performance, and with this good performance, you're thinking to yourself like, hey, this could be a good thing rest of the season. We'll start with Julia. Who's a player that comes to mind for that?
I mean, watching last night, I'd have to say Javonte Williams. That guy is he's amazing. I especially love when anyone who clearly has talent gets the opportunity, and it's a little bit of luck, it's a little bit of everything. And he looked amazing. He was dragging defenders for like 5-10 yards. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know how soon Melvin Gordon's going to be back, but even if he does come back right away, hopefully Williams is going to get a little bit more work, because I really liked watching him run.
And there was a lot of talk on Twitter. People were saying, the expectation was too high, and that, if he comes out and he scores 11 fantasy points, then we were, too well above expectations. But for him to ball out like that with the full workload and be the RB1 of the week was a great sign for fantasy. Yeah. So I know they have the Detroit matchup coming up. I think even if Melvin Gordon is back, I think Javonte is probably an interesting play, just because we know the state of the Lions, who just got their first win. So I'm not going to say nothing too bad about them. But he's an interesting play rest of the season, and they might start slowly giving the work to him. We'll have to see. Justin, any thoughts on Javonte Williams, his performance, and then let us know the same topic, somebody who had a good game and it's a good sign moving forward.
Yeah, Javonte Williams, man, awesome play. Everybody was really excited once Melvin Gordon went out. You could see kind of Twitter was like, all right, is it going to be one of those performances or not? And it was. It was one of those performances where we got it right. And I think in the fantasy community, we knew it was a perfect situation for him. Played well enough in college, had the college profile to back up the expectation. And once he got the carries, the catches too, we saw he put it to work. And so I really liked what I saw out of Javonte. Can't wait to see what happens when they change the quarterback situation, because I feel like that might even open things up more. But a real positive that I took away from yesterday's game was the reemergence, I should say, of T. Higgins becoming the de facto number one wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I understand there was a ton of Jamar Chase love early on in the season, but for those who were really paying attention, we knew, okay, Joe Mixon was a little banged up early in the season. T. Higgins was out for a part of the season. So we knew, okay, there was going to be some regression when it came to Jamar Chase. Didn't think it would happen this quickly, but it does excite me to see T. Higgins kind of retain that role as the wide receiver one for this team, possession receiver. I like what I saw.
Yeah, I think so too, because now we're looking at 2 really good weeks, because it's over 20 fantasy points back-to-back weeks. His ceiling before that was week 2, 16 fantasy points, which is not bad by any means, but it wasn't what we expected after what we saw from last year. And a lot of people started to talk, like you just said, Justin, like, Chase is that dude now. Chase is that dude. I don't know what Higgins is going to be, because for a couple weeks in a row, he was scoring somewhere between 10 and like 13 and change points. So back-to-back weeks, I'm with you on this. Julia, any thoughts on T. Higgins? Are you on the same page there?
Yeah, it was really nice to see him put 2 weeks together, in succession. And I think Chase was great, and I think he will continue to be wonderful. But I think there was that shiny new penny sort of syndrome thing with him. And it's like, we all got on board and it was great. But I think they were talking about it on the podcast today. It hasn't been since week 7 that he's been in the top 25, or it's something like that. I don't know for sure, but it's like we were so blinded by that we kind of weren't really looking that he was sort of falling off a little bit. But yeah, it was nice to see Higgins go off again. I have him on a couple teams. That was nice to see. So.
Same. He was in a must-win game for me. Back-to-back weeks with a touchdown, back-to-back weeks over 110 yards, I guess we can say. And he had 14 targets in this one, which is awesome for him. My guy, it really depends on the health. But I saw some news today from Yahoo that said he believes he will absolutely be back after the bye week because his team has a bye week. Two different stories sometimes from a player and a doctor or the trainer, but I'm going to say Miles Sanders, who I haven't really been a huge fan of, in all honesty. But 24 attempts for 120 rushing yards. He had 3 catches, which is a good sign for him. The 3 games after he came back from his injury, 5.9, 7.1, and 5 yards per carry, 94, 64, 120 rushing yards. So we're seeing him run the ball really well. Now he's getting a couple passes here. And I think weekly moving forward, if he can find the end zone, he can end up being a really nice play because the volume's there. And what I really like about him coming up is that after this bye, so we can get healthy on it, he's got Washington twice in the Giants. And Washington's like a middle-of-the-road defense against running backs. The Giants are a top 10 in points allowed to running backs. I think these are very winnable games for the Eagles. I mean, we can sit here and debate on the matchups and things, but I think it's going to give him the opportunity to continue this volume. So I do like Sanders as long as he's healthy rest of the season. And it's nice to see him getting these carries because we saw this weird mixture of Boston Scott and Jordan Howard and Kenny Gainwell and Justin and Nick and Julia all running the ball. So, I mean, it's been wild.
Yeah, it's such a muddied up running back room there. And it's just like I had to start Boston Scott in a couple places, and I was like, oh, so he's just not even gonna play. Just gonna return a punt, and then that's it. It's like, you know.
Are you guys? Do you guys have any pushback on Sanders? You guys optimistic the rest of the season as well? What's your guys' thoughts?
So I like that they're committed to Miles Sanders right now, and I feel like that's the one thing you want to see out of a team. They say, hey, this is our guy. He was out for 3 weeks with the injury on IR, and it came right back to him. They said, you know what? Before he got hurt, they said, hey, we're going to make it a focus to get Miles Sanders involved. He came back, and the message had still remained. Even though we saw Boston Scott go off for some yards, we saw Jordan Howard go off. We saw Kenny Gainwell hit the radar and then fall completely off the radar. And it's like, you know what? The one thing with this offense has been Miles Sanders is the guy, whether he's played well or not. And he played really well yesterday. So you want to see them come off the bye and still have them incorporated. Jalen Hurts will be back. So hopefully they can continue this thing for fantasy playoffs.
Well, I mean, on that note, do you think that we won't see as much with Sanders then with having Hurts back? Is he going to – I mean, I personally think that's the thing. It's like when you get close to the goal line and you have Jalen Hurts, he's going to be running it in. So I think we might not know too.
I think we just temper expectations, instead of thinking that Miles Sanders is supposed to be a running back one, you've already kind of made up for that at this point. If you're still playing for your fantasy life or you're in the fantasy playoff hunt, you've already kind of made up for the fact that Miles Sanders has been a lost cause this year. So what you have now is a strong flex option. You have somebody who can reliably get you 10 to 15 points if you're playing PPR and get you those points that you need, even if he doesn't get a touchdown, because they're getting him involved in the passing game and the run game. So I do like what Miles Sanders brings. It's just, what's your level of expectation? If you drafted him in the 3rd round and you're like, I need 3rd round value out of him, sorry, you're probably not going to get it. But if you've made up for it since now, he's good flex value.
Yeah, I agree with you.
In 16 carries in his first game back from the injury, and that was with Jalen Hurts. I mean, the games are really going to be dependent if the Eagles are trailing in these games and they're going to make, Hurts push the ball down the field. That's one thing. But I think we've seen plenty of times this season where I am a fan of Jalen Hurts.
I love him.
But there's been times where he's forced to do big things down the field, and we get drops from Rieger and guys not open sometimes. So I think that they want to be able to establish the run. So I like it. I like it. On the flip side, so positive, but maybe we're not as optimistic. So let's talk about a player that comes to mind, had a good day, had a big performance, but let's slow down and not get overhyped about it. It was a good day. Let's not get carried away. We'll start with Justin on this one. Who's a guy that comes to mind for this sort of category?
I'm going to probably throw a lot of people off with this one, but I'm going to go with the guy who had really one big touch that carried his day, and that's Tony Pollard. I think the expectation is that, hey, he looks like the guy that's going to take over at some point. He's exciting to watch. He's electric on film when you're watching him. But I still get Zeke is still the guy there. And as much as fantasy owners want to see Tony Pollard take over that role, get the RB1 touches. For this season, we don't have very much time left for him to take over. And even if it becomes a split carry, he's not getting those home run touches. The workhorse back is still Zeke. The goal line back is still Zeke. So while it looks good, he got 7 carries, 71 yards, had a touchdown. For me, that 150-yard TD we're talking about a whole different day out of Tony Pollard. So I get the excitement. I know the electricity is there. At some point, he might be fantasy relevant, but unless Zeke gets hurt or goes down, I'm not on the Tony Pollard train. I like him as a player, and I know at some point he'll be a factor again. Just not sold on him yet.
Yeah, and I think like you just said, he had that huge play in the last game. But then when you look at, you dig deeper, he had 9 touches in this game. I mean, it's not like he rushed for 70 yards because he had 15 carries or something along those lines, or I'm sorry, 80 total yards and had 12 touches or something like that. So people continue to comment like Zeke looks slow. He doesn't really look that good right now as of late. He's still the guy though. And I think Tony Pollard's going to have a role, but it reminds me, it kind of reminds me of last year with like DeAndre Swift. He was behind somebody. Now you're banking on him being like super efficient with minimal touches, which Swift was at times last year. But I get that. I don't see, and there was another big debate on Twitter, like him taking over at some point this year. And I'm not sold on that at all. Like maybe people that roster him are, but
yeah, they want it to happen. I think you just want it to happen. You're like, oh, I take this guy as a late round flyer. But the Cowboys have invested a lot of money in Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah. And that's not going to just drop off,
I think it's one of those things like, tell me you roster Pollard without telling me you roster Pollard.
Exactly.
But, Julia, any thoughts on Tony Pollard? And then, again, we'll shift to you on somebody that had a big day that you don't want to overhype.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the Tony Pollard situation. I think he's definitely one of your top 3 or 4 handcuffs. Like if you have a spot on your bench, put him there, because same with like Zeke fighting a couple of things. He looks a little slower than I'd like him to look. Pollard's a great person to have as a just in case. But yeah, you're right. They're not going to make him their number 1 running back. Like I don't know what world people are living in that they think that's going to happen, but okay. I mean, he's running fast. It's nice to see, but yeah, I'm still on the Ezekiel Elliott train. Hopefully he will score some more. That's what I'd like to see. Probably the player that I think might be a little overhyped, and it's hard because I really like him, and I liked him so much at the beginning of the year, is Mike Williams. Mike Williams gives me so much anxiety whenever a ball is thrown in his direction and he just reaches up, and I'm afraid he's going to fall down and break every bone in his body. But it's like his points he's just so up and down. And it's like every time that you're going to start him, he's getting 2 fantasy points. And every time you bench him, he's going to go off for 26. So it's like not consistent anymore. And I feel like as much as I love the Chargers offense, they still have a few things that they have to figure out. I mean, I do say this about Mike Williams, and then I was getting that notification earlier. Doesn't Keenan Allen have COVID now?
Yes.
So maybe I'm a little bit more on Mike Williams at this point. But I want to believe in him, but I just don't. He's not consistent enough for me at this point. Like, I think if you're this far and you're trying to move on to the playoffs, like unless you're in desperation need for a massive, ceiling possibility, I can't go in on it. And I'm always afraid he's going to break himself.
Yeah. It's, I mean, if we look at the opening of the season, we all know how that started. He was super hot. The first 3 weeks was amazing. But since those first 3 weeks, I'm looking at it, he has never gone back-to-back weeks with a good fantasy outing. And like you said, if you need the points, you can chase the points with him. Yeah. He does have a very high ceiling. Maybe in the fantasy playoffs when Keenan Allen is back. If Keenan Allen's out, maybe it's a different story because maybe he's got the opportunity. Yeah, he might have like 12 targets or something. But in the playoffs, if you're in a matchup, maybe it's something you juggle. Like Thursday, my opponent in the playoffs, his guys went off. Like I need a lot on Sunday. Then it's a smash. Like I got to do it. Or is it I'm ahead on Thursday. Sunday I need a safe 12 points. Right. Then I'm benching him. So it's a weird dynamic with something like that. Really high ceiling, really low floor. Interesting. But
Justin, what's your thoughts? Yeah, it kind of gives me the same Jamar Chase type of vibe where he started off the season so hot, and there's another really reliable receiving option there. And teams adjust too. You're not going to just let Mike Williams catch 102 touchdowns on you every week. You're not going to let Jamar Chase go off for a 70-yard bomb every single week. So teams adjust. Those big plays, a lot of times that caught teams off guard early on in the season, start to get minimized towards the middle to end of the season when we need it the most as fantasy managers. So I think, to temper expectations with Mike Williams, if you have him slotted as your wide receiver 1 or 2, sorry, you're probably in trouble. But most people got Mike Williams towards the end of draft, so you can't be really complaining with somebody who should be locked into your lineups as a wide receiver 3 or flex with upside.
Yeah, I think sometimes with players like that too, the data ends up looking skewed because so many of their yards are on like one broken play for like 65 yards or something. And it looks great. And then you had, 4 other catches, and then you finish the day with 90. Like, you gotta dig deep when you're looking at the data. So
absolutely.
I don't know a ton about this question. I'm wondering if you guys do. Is there a chance with Keenan Allen, just because we're on the same topic, is there a chance that he is on the COVID list that he can be cleared by next week? Is it if he's vaccinated or something? Is that the case?
If he's vaccinated, what's today? Monday.
Yes.
If he's vaccinated, I think he can play on Sunday. He just has to have the 2 negative tests 24 hours apart, and if he doesn't have symptoms, right?
100%.
Hashtag not a doctor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what I was about to say. I'm like, I don't want to start making these claims here, but that's what I thought. But
no, that's the news. That's what I picked up too. Is as long as you have the negative test before game time, you're good if you're vaccinated.
Yeah. I have to test like every day for working on set. So it's like I've learned a lot about COVID now. Yeah.
Jeez, that's a lot of swab.
All cleared out, right?
Oh my God, I've probably done over 500 tests. It's just,
wow.
I just do it. Yeah.
Just raw. You could
raw.
You probably don't have too many days stuffed up because they'll just clear you right out.
There's a guy in there.
So Mike Williams, I mean, in the event Keenan Allen is out this week, maybe then he's a smash play, but otherwise, I think he's a guy you juggle around a little bit. I like your guys' answers a lot because I feel like I went the easier route with a guy that wasn't super fantasy relevant too much this season, but I wrote down for a reason. There's a lot of casual fantasy managers that listen and stuff, and sometimes it's good to attack things that we're like, oh, well, I wouldn't play that guy anyways. But Mike Davis, 16.9. Yep. He had 16.9 fantasy points, and people will look at that though, and they'll look on their waiver wire and say, what did these guys score last week? I really need a running back. Yeah. And they'll say 16.9 fantasy points. That's playable. He is not playable. He's not playable. It's a trap. It's a major trap. He had a touchdown, which is a big reason. He had 8 total touches. So when I keep referring to touches and again, receptions and carries, second game in a row with 8 total touches. This was his highest total touches in the last handful of weeks here. I mean, he's had games where he only touched the ball 6 times, 4 times. The last time he scored 12 fantasy points was in week 5. Other than that, he's scored under 12 fantasy points every single week, except for this week. If we look at Patterson, who's been balling out this season, on the other hand, he's had 18 and 16 total touches in the last 2 games. Don't fall into the trap because at this point of the year, we've seen so many guys get injured, right, for the running back position. You can go down the entire list of everybody out between Derrick Henry and Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. I mean, you just go down. CMC is out. So we're always looking for, like, who can I plug in to my lineup? And there's other guys that are widely available that I would play above Mike Davis. So that's my don't fall into a trap suggestion there.
Mike Davis has been a talking point for us on the fantasy gods. That was one of my very first posts that went kind of not semi-viral at the time. For our account, it was a smaller account, so it went semi-viral. And because it was so controversial, he was getting so much love in the offseason for look what he did in Carolina last year. And he's going to go to Atlanta and be a running back 1 and be better than Joe Mixon. And I was like, man, sometimes you got to understand the talent versus opportunity. And now his opportunity has even been limited. So when you're only getting 8 touches a game, and that's the definition of touchdown dependent. If he doesn't have a touchdown, he's under 10 points. And so you can't reliably start that for your team. So Mike Davis, man, he's one of those guys, just you want to root for him. 29-year-old running back, you want to root for him, but he's just not it.
Yeah. I was rooting for him early on in the season, and I had him in a couple leagues, and then I was like, stop trying to make Mike Davis happen. It's not going to happen.
And I think some of this is a little bit on him because he teased us with the short shorts in the preseason when he had the massive quads and he had
Saquon
the
quads.
baseball. Oh my God, the guy looked like a monster, like he was about to eat
Big
somebody,
Dylan
and
quads.
it was
Love a
unreal.
quad.
Yeah,
The
we
plotter.
are.
That's what got me. I was mesmerized by the quads. Yeah.
I mean,
that big frame has to fit through a hole though.
Every time.
That's the only problem. You can't run into your lineman's back all the time.
They're just running.
The fantasy community is a major sucker for quad pictures all the time.
Yes.
I will say that. Sometimes it's right, with Saquon when he was being himself, and then AJ Dillon's looked pretty good this season. He's had the quad, but Mike Davis tried to sneak in there and was like, "Me too, me too, me too." But don't fall for the trap. Don't fall for the trap. Let's go to the other side of performances. So it's important to look at bad performances and break it down and think, is this a sign of more bad performances or was it just a bad day? Because most fantasy players outside of a very small amount of guys have a bad week. So we don't want to overreact sometimes, but sometimes it's right to jump to conclusions because it's a sign of more things to come. And we're getting towards the fantasy playoffs here. So it's good to break these down. So question here next, who had a bad performance but we shouldn't be worried about it? So they had a bad day, but let's not overreact and be too concerned about it. I'll throw mine out there first and get your guys' thoughts. I wrote down James Robinson, and there are some concerns for me. The one concern is this heel issue that he's got going on, in his foot issue. I think because of that and the fact that they got blown out 37-7, they sat him out. I mean, Urban Meyer, I guess they interviewed him, and he was saying, like, I'm not sure why he sat out. And then he said, well, my running back coach sat him out. Well, he's actually banged up. So he had all these weird stories to why James Robinson, barely played. He fumbled the ball, and people thought maybe he was getting benched for that. He had 2.5 fantasy points. I think when he is the best piece of your offense right now, because it's just a fact that he's been the best player this season for their offense, there's no reason to force a guy who is hurting in a 37-7 loss. So the Titans are coming up. It'll be a bit of a tougher game because they're not super running back friendly. But weeks 15, he plays Houston. That's number 6. Gives up the 6 most points per game to running backs. And then in week 16, they play the Jets, who give up the most points to running backs for fantasy. So I'm going to say if you have James Robinson, it looks terrible. It probably killed you this week. But there's a lot of factors of this, and I'm not as concerned. I will say, though, monitor the injury, because if he's, a game-time decision, then you're like, I don't know what this is looking like. But what's your guys' thoughts? Anybody can hop in on James Robinson rest of the season.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it was a little game script, situation and a little bit of injury. Same thing. I think he's going to be fine, just pending the injury. And like you said, those last 2 games are really great matchups if you are a James Robinson owner. So I think he's going to be okay. So.
I'm not big on the James Robinson hype train, man. I don't know what it is. I think it might be some of the lower round draft capital there and also the investment that they made in Travis Etienne. It doesn't seem like this organization is fully behind James Robinson being their back. And so, obviously they're taking precaution with the injury. I think that was a bigger talking point than anything else for last game. But when you see Carlos Hyde still really involved in there, you kind of see Laviska Shenault just not even having a role on this team. It seems like they're going to do things their way, and it doesn't seem to involve James Robinson or Laviska Shenault for whatever reason. So to me, I'm not necessarily panicking with James Robinson. I'm just not really expecting much better, if that makes sense.
Why does Urban Meyer not like him? What is the deal? Does he? What is his obsession with Carlos Hyde? He loves Carlos Hyde.
It's your guys. Sometimes you got your guys, and you play your guys and stick to your guys. I feel like James Robinson just isn't an Urban Meyer guy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he, this game, obviously, we're talking about a really, really down week. His worst of the season. The week prior, 17 carries, 3 catches. So that's some decent volume. But then the week before that, only 12 carries. So it is a little bit sporadic. I think I have some faith just because there's some really juicy matchups coming up. But I'm hoping he's healthy, and I'm hoping that these guys play their players. I mean, you mentioned Laviska Shenault. People look at him like he is a dud. They don't use him, to his skill set at all. I mean, I thought he would be running the ball a little bit on some sweeps, operating in the slot more, and they're just really, the offense is just really bad. I talked on a board session in here, not to vent, but about how, Trevor Lawrence has been great. The offensive line's not great. The play calling's pretty bad. Everything kind of trickles down so that it's a spider web effect of, now I can't play Marvin Jones. Now I can't play Laviska Shenault.
Yep.
So,
That's a good point.
Yeah. It's just, it sucks because it's like there was so much potential for that team. And I think there's so much of that culture that has now been damaged by a little bit of Urban Meyer, I think. And I'm hopeful with whatever they end up doing on the off season to see, I'd like a different coach there. I'd like to see some of these guys have a better opportunity.
So to shift over, Julia, who was your pick for this same topic? Somebody who had a really bad day. You're not worried about it though.
I'm a little tainted on this side because it's not really a really bad game, but I'm just used to having so much more for him. Was Cordell Patterson. I was just so used to having these like 2-3 touchdown games, and then he just looked like a nice average running back. And I'm not super worried. Like we were talking about that. Like they want him to have the ball. He is running the show down there. So I think he will be fine, but I think it was weird for owners who were used to seeing him carry their team for a couple weeks, because I certainly was used to that.
But you get used to those 20-point games, man.
Oh man, he's so fun. He's so fun, that kid.
It's almost like we get spoiled with this though, because at the beginning of the season, if somebody said, well, Patterson is going to be my starter for most of the season, and he's going to rush the ball for over 6 yards per carry in a lot of these games. The last 3 games, week 10, he only had 4 carries, but the past 2 weeks, he's rushed the ball for 6.8 and then 6 yards per carry. And he's been awesome. So yeah, I hear you, because the expectation has just been massive for a guy that we had no expectations of this season.
We all got off the waiver wire. That was the thing. It's like you just picked him up and you were like, this guy's going to carry me home. Yeah.
Rest of season, he's such a big. It's weird too when he was gone from that offense. Yeah. What was it? The New England game.
Yeah,
it was night and day, and that is a bad sign for that team.
Yeah.
He's such a dynamic playmaker for multiple purposes. And I think it just makes you play honest defense. You can't just load up on Kyle Pitts. You can't just go in. Well, they still get to Matt Ryan all the time with that terrible line, but you just can't key in on anything when you have him, because he's in the backfield. He's in the slot. He's outside. Like, he just does so many different things for that team. And I think for our fantasy teams as well, when you see a 10 to 13 point game, you're like, well, what happened? Yeah. It's good that we've kind of come to expect that out of somebody who's been a returner for most of his career. Yeah. And now we're finally getting to see him in the backfield, making plays. I love seeing Cordell Patterson in space.
He's so good.
Yeah, and it's bittersweet as a Chicago fan, because he was once here and he was just a special teams guy, and now he's balling out somewhere else. But Justin, same topic, man. Had a bad day. You're not worried about it though.
Yeah, and this isn't, I don't even know if I would categorize this as a bad day. It's kind of similar to what Julia said. It's more so just our expectation of this player. And you mentioned quads earlier. I'm going to talk about Saquon Barkley. A lot of people were panicking on him when he got injured. It was like, hey, he got his high ankle sprain. He's not going to be the same player. They're saying he's washed up. He's been injury prone. There's a lot of things that go on about Saquon Barkley. And what I saw out of him looked really explosive. He had a couple big games, big plays. He looked like the Saquon, just didn't have the volume that you want to see. Only 11 carries. I think he had like 6 catches too, but he only had 11 carries. So it kind of made up for his day. But he's a player that when I look at him on film, I'm like, I still see the same Saquon. I just don't see the 20 to 25 touches we're used to seeing. So as we move into the fantasy playoffs, I like his upcoming schedule. I think he still looks good. I'm not really worried about Saquon Barkley. And I know the thing is to say that he looks washed up. He still was out there making plays to me. So I know there's a lot of concern about him. That team overall, the Giants just don't look good. But for me, Saquon, he seems like a safe play still. Maybe not as your high end as you drafted him, 25-point guy, but maybe he's more of like a 15 to 20-point guy now until he shows that he can be better.
Yeah. And this team looks like there's a possibility that Jake Fromm Jake Fromm might be the starter this week potentially. But to me, what that says, exactly, yeah, check down city to Saquon. I mean, you mentioned he had 6 catches this week. This was his third 6 catch on the dot week this season. So that's the upside for him, I think. I think that this team is going to be chasing a lot of games. And I think with so many guys banged up, I mean, didn't have Shepard, didn't have Tony. Kenny Golladay just got hurt like for the 18th time. Again, we got all these guys banged up. He is going to be a Patterson. He's going to be used like Patterson, actually. He's going to be this de facto run the ball sometimes, but probably get like 8 targets on a week going forward. And, he hasn't been himself in the degree that, like you said, he's over 20 fantasy points. But that's going to be big for PPR if whoever's at quarterback is targeting this guy like 8 times, and that'll have some upside there. Julia, you have any Saquon Barkley thoughts?
It's funny because I'm a little more worried about Saquon and the entire Giants offense than Justin is. But like you said, if we're getting another third string quarterback and it might prove more beneficial for Saquon. Like you said, just little checkdowns and stuff like that. I mean, it just breaks my heart because it's like, he's so good and he's so talented. And I just want him to be somewhere where we can really see him go. I mean, with so many of those Giants too, like even like Daniel Jones, I think, God, if he would have just landed somewhere else, because he has an arm. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Saquon. I was happy. I didn't draft any Saquon this season just simply because I didn't want to touch anything about Giants. Yeah, I agree with you. He looked fast. He looked a little bit like himself for one of the first times in a long time. And that was nice to see. So
look. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I think the big thing with him is staying on the field, because if he stays on the field, we know what he is. Like, I don't think his game is going to change, and even we've seen him produce in terrible circumstances already. So outside of the injuries, if we're looking 3-4 weeks down the line when fantasy, or 2-3 weeks, I should say now, when fantasy playoffs are going on, as long as Saquon is healthy, he's matchup proof. He's situational proof. Like, he's kind of earned that, I think. And so for me, when I hear the panic of like he's washed, I get it. Don't get me wrong, I understand it. But for me, I've been playing fantasy for so long that I've seen kind of that talent normally prevails in those situations, and especially when he's getting the catches. He's got the floor now that you want to see.
Yeah, it might be gross and messy to watch it happen, but at the end of the day,
absolutely.
Close your eyes and let it happen.
That's fair. Well, on the flip side of things, and I'm cheating because I looked at the show sheet we had in advance here, but I asked the same question: bad performance that we should actually be worried about. Julia, did you want to mention the rest of the Giants offense? Because I think that was your pick, unless you had somebody else.
Pretty much
sorry, I didn't mean to destroy that.
Oh, that's good. It's a good transition. It was a little bridge there. Like,
it's just like, it's like they're held together with like scotch tape and bubble wrap over there. It's like, you can't keep a quarterback. I mean, what's happening with Kenny Golladay? I don't think, minus Saquon, because honestly, you've turned me a little bit on that argument. I can't imagine anyone in good conscience starting any Giant at any point in this. Like, it's dangerous, I think. I think another person that I expected to see a lot more from with DeAndre Swift out was Jamal Williams. And that was weird. Like, I really was expecting a big game from him, and it was just kind of like, bleh, just bleh. So that was kind of weird to see as well. And I don't know when Swift's coming back. Is he coming back next week? Maybe.
I think it was like a 1 to 2 week thing. So
yeah,
it's one of those game time decisions probably.
Yeah.
I wonder though, because they're not playing for much, and he's the best. He is, my opinion, he is the focal point of their franchise right now. I mean, we can say T.J. Hockenson is good. DeAndre Swift is an absolute baller. So I wonder if they're like, this season for us is over. We got our 1 win. Like, chill. I hope they don't, because that's my favorite. It's my favorite player in the league. I got him in 10 out of 15 fantasy leagues. So, like, I want him to play, but I can also see them being like, nah.
I mean, I hope he does. Dan Campbell, I was so happy for those guys on Sunday, and I'm not even a Lions fan, but I mean, how great was to see all that stuff at the end of it. Did you guys watch the press conference? And just, I feel like Dan Campbell is always like on the verge of tears. He's such a good man, and I hope to all hopes that they do not fire him, because I think he is an incredible coach who got a lot of bad luck this year, and also some bad players, but that's a whole other thing.
You can tell those guys are playing to win, which is a good sign. Even for, you mentioned you have 10 shares of DeAndre Swift across 15 leagues. I think that's actually a good sign for DeAndre Swift, because they're not just going to sit guys. They're going to play their guys. And Jared Goff came back. He looked decent, you would say, for Jared Goff standards. He looked decent. Got him there for a win. Yeah. And TJ Hawkinson saw a good game. A couple of young guys there started to show out. So I don't think the Lions don't have any quitting them, man. So I think it's a good sign for DeAndre Swift, actually. And the bad sign you're right, though, about Jamal Williams. It was a little concerning to not see him get the performance that you wanted to see out of him.
Yeah. It's nice to see Campbell make the gutsy coaching calls, like the going for it on fourth down. Like you're saying, they're trying to win. Like they want to be the spoiler for whoever comes to town. So I think that's tough to do when you have.
They still have an outside chance at playoffs. They're trying to get in.
Really?
Yeah, there's this huge board of like everything that has to happen for the Lions to get in, and they still have an opportunity to get into the playoffs.
Is it the guy on the whiteboard who's like, and then this happens, and then this happens?
Pretty much.
The spider web of things.
Pretty much.
Like conspiracy theories and things like that. But no, I saw the locker room, Dan Campbell, the speech afterwards with the guys, and those guys liked him. So I'm with you. I hope they bring him back, because I feel like the players know his passion for their team, despite what they've actually. I tweeted out. I had all the breakdowns. They actually lost a handful of games this season against good teams by a very small margin. Like it's interesting. But Jamal Williams, like you mentioned here, could be a little iffy, because the next two matchups are Denver and Arizona, who are not like the nicest of defenses to play against. So hoping Swift's back, but if not, I mean, you can probably count on Jamal Williams to get a bunch of carries and some looks in the passing game. But at the same time, probably not going to be the most friendly of places. If it was if it was a Houston or the Jets or one of those teams, we're talking about two different stories. But
right,
on the flip side, Justin, we discussed bad performance. Don't worry about it. Same topic. Who had a bad day and you're a bit concerned?
Yeah, I don't know if I can go with two guys, but they're very similar to me. And I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not stealing anybody's, but. Courtland Sutton and Rashad Bateman, both to me are like the parallel. We have such high expectations for both these players. I get Courtland Sutton was coming off the injury. Rashad Bateman had an injury early on. They're both on offenses that just don't pass the ball effectively. Like call it what it is. The Ravens, to me, obviously they had that strong start with Marquise Hollywood Brown was going off early on, but they've kind of regressed. And to me, Rashad Bateman, I had a lot of expectations for Bateman. I thought he was going to have a very strong second half of this year, and he just has not produced. Courtland Sutton, I thought with the addition of Jerry Jeudy, it would actually help the offense. It would help Jeudy. It would help Courtland Sutton. And both of those guys, to me, are barely rosterable at this point. If I have them in a deep league, 12-team league, I'll keep them on the bench. Outside of that, I don't know that I would keep either of those guys. So Rashad Bateman and Courtland Sutton to me are just receiving options right now. They're not reliable, and they show you a big week in week 14. Are you going to start them in week 15 for fantasy playoffs? I'm not.
Scary.
No,
yeah.
No. Those are both really good calls. I'm on the same page because I tweeted out like a screenshot of Courtland Sutton's last couple games, and I didn't leave his name in there. I'm like, is this guy worth rostering in fantasy right now heading into playoffs? And the answer, in my opinion, is no, because he hasn't scored 5 fantasy points in his last 1, 2, 3, 4 games. And then the game before that, he scored 6 fantasy points. So I'm with you with Sutton. And Bateman was a great call, too, because that was actually going to be my pick before I picked who I'm going to talk about eventually. But Bateman, I'm with you. The talent is there. He was seeing 8 targets back-to-back weeks at one point. He came right into some snaps. And you look at week 11 versus Chicago, he played 70% of the snaps. The last 2 games, 44 and 45% of the snaps, which is a terrible sign.
Wow.
He's so talented. I don't know what's happening.
I think it's going to be tough to roster him as well. But it depends on the league, obviously. So I'd say the most casual of leagues are 10 to 12 people leagues, and the benches are probably like 5 spots. So if you got some other guys like a Russell Gage who just balled out, he had 11 catches. Are you gonna take that guy who's getting a ton of work, or are you gonna stash Bateman for the fantasy playoffs. I don't know.
Yeah, and Greg Roman he's shown this has been Greg Roman. He can't carry two receivers. Like, it just does not happen. Greg Roman does not carry two fantasy wide receivers. It's just not possible with the Greg Roman offense. I don't know if it's fixable, even if the talent is there. And that's the biggest point is, I think a lot of people, as you're going into the fantasy playoffs, you can't trade these guys anymore. So unless you have a trade deadline where there's value in there, if they're not startable for your team, what's the point of having them? The only way Rashad Bateman even has value as a run-centric Baltimore Ravens team is heading into the playoffs and cold weather divisional games. The only way they're going to start airing it out is if Hollywood Brown gets hurt. Then you have Rashad Bateman. But other than that, there's no point of having him on your team.
I agree, 100%.
We don't do wide receiver handcuffs.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's the thing.
That's not the play to win mantra. There is stashing wide receivers. Julia, do you have any faith in Bateman or Sutton?
No, I mean, I was a big proponent of Bateman early on in the season as well. I really believe in him. I mean, I'm a little more nervous about the whole Lamar situation. I have Lamar in a league, and it seems like since he was sick with whatever mystery illness he has, he just isn't looking like himself. I'm hoping that is going to change. It's just grosser to watch him. Like, he's scoring a little bit and whatnot, but it's not the Lamar we're used to. So if you're just adding points onto why you're not holding on to Bateman, that's another one that I throw on there. Just you have to think about who's throwing you the ball. Same situation in Denver. I love Teddy Bridgewater, but there's better dart throws with better quarterbacks out there. So
yeah, and with Lamar Jackson, last 3 games has in 15.4, 9.4, 17.6 for fantasy. I think we're spoiled at times too, and I'm saying it because that a 17-point game from Tua would have been that was good. But Lamar Jackson, you expect him to be a top 3 play every week, so that is a bit of the frustrating part. The guy I want to mention, it's kind of like the elephant in the room, and I'm not suggesting, if you are listening to this, that you need to bench him. It's kind of one of those things of it's one of those things for your roster decisions of, how deep am I at this position, and if things don't change, what do I do in the fantasy playoffs? And I love the talent, I love the player, but I'm concerned about DK Metcalf, and I think this week against Houston is a gimme, get DK right. They just said it this past week. They said we need to get DK the ball, and I quote tweeted it on Twitter. I'm like, water's wet, no shit, you should be giving him the ball. But weeks 10 through 13 so far, because we still have a game today, he has been the wide receiver 52 for fantasy, averaging 6.5 fantasy points. His highest score since the bye has been 11 fantasy points. 3 out of 4 of his last games, he's been under 32 receiving yards. It's concerning to me because it's not like he had 2 games in a row that were pretty bad. It's 4. He's had 4 bad games in a row. The good sign is that 3 out of 4 of these games I'm talking about, he had exactly 8 targets. So that's good. But, Russell Wilson himself hasn't looked amazing since he's come back. I think he's starting to gradually look better. But I'm concerned. I'm concerned because this was once a guy that you were extremely confident in. He was scoring 20+ fantasy points. I had the mark here somewhere. 6 games with 16+ fantasy points before the bye. But now you're going into these matchups saying, do I sit DK? And, I think Houston is a good game. I think Houston's a good game. But I think, knowing the talent of DK and seeing that he scored great this season earlier on, I think it's tough. I think it's just one of those things hey, I know he can score 20, so I'm going to put him in my lineup, but he might score 10 again. What are your guys' thoughts on DK? I'm not saying it again. I'm not saying bench this guy right now, but I'm saying that it's just not a comfortable play like we thought it was.
Yeah, I hope if you had him, you drafted him as your wide receiver 1 for the most part. If you have DK Metcalf, maybe your wide receiver 2 if you're aggressive like me. But DK to me has always been really a high ceiling, low floor player in the past. This season, early on, we kind of saw him start to break that trend, which was, was really good to see. You were thinking, okay, he's taking the next step forward. Him and Russ have the connection. And then the Russ injury kind of changed everything. So are we going to see that in the fantasy playoffs? And I think he's become kind of matchup dependent too. When he has strong matchups, sometimes he does struggle. We've seen that with Jalen Ramsey. So I think with DK, it's become more of a question mark than you want to see out of a top 7 wide receiver option that he was coming into the season. But now we've adjusted. He's not that. He's more of a high-end wide receiver 2, bottom-end wide receiver 1. You have to slot him in there and just pray that he has the good week and less bad weeks. I think he's just an inconsistent. He reminds me of what a lot of people think Mike Evans is.
Yeah. And then Mike Evans falls in the end zone for 2 touchdowns and 20 yards.
That's what I thought this week was going to be for DK, but it just wasn't. But Julia, what's your thoughts here?
No, I totally agree with you as well. It's like, look, are you not starting DK Metcalf? If you have him, you're probably going to start him. Like you drafted him early, and you probably don't have that many better options. So it's like you said, it's like you just hope that this week was Russ getting better, and next week's matchup will hopefully continue. We'll continue to see that. And you just have to go, like you said, temper your expectations. He's not going to be that wide receiver 1 that's scoring you 2 touchdowns and 160 yards. He's just not going to be. Maybe you'll get lucky and get that game, but then also that could go to Tyler Lockett as well. So it's like, just stop throwing to Gerald Everett. And maybe what was that? Why does he do that? Why does he keep throwing to him?
And we mentioned a guy like Cortland Sutton earlier, who was once a big time target, but you compare DK and him, 2 guys that have struggled lately. But Sutton's had games where he's had like 2 targets and 3 targets twice and 4 targets, but DK's still getting heavy targets, so I think it'll fall in line. But it just could be risky at times. But again, like you guys both said it's the guy you drafted, and you're rolling with him at this point.
Yeah.
We're got getting close to the hour mark here, so I got 2 more quick ones, and we can just roll through these quick before we close the show out. But tomorrow, I typically put out some sort of video for waiver wire moves for the next week coming up. So let's take a quick look in advance, and I'll just ask you, give me one name of a guy that you are trying to acquire off the waiver wire or suggesting for fantasy managers. Had a bunch of injuries this week. Just to name a couple: Galladay, Corey Davis, Adam Thielen, Logan Thomas, Kenyon Drake. Other guys stepped up big time this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Russell Gage, Deontay Harris, Kenny Gainwell, Jakeem Grant, Jalen Guyton, KJ Osborne. I can go down the list. Give me a guy. Justin, who's the guy that we should be looking at from the waiver wire here?
Yeah, and I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a name. 12 targets last game. I thought the Josh Reynolds connection was there with Jared Goff, and it still is. We saw T.J. Hawkinson, but we talked about it. DeAndre Swift, if he happens to just not be in the lineup, they may be little targets his way. To me, it's a good option to have on your bench. We talked about startable players in the fantasy playoffs, and this is a guy that carries upside as opposed to, hey, you're just trying to hold on to the name with a Cortland Sutton. St. Brown has the upside that you want to see. They may be looking to move more his way. So with 12 targets, I think that's a good showing, a good sign of things to come, and a game-winning touchdown.
Absolutely. That was his big breakout day. He had a couple games in the past where he was like around the 13 fantasy point range, and 12 targets isn't a fluke. I mean, there's times we see a guy fall into the end zone, and then there's a time where a guy's a major piece of a team getting their first win. So I'm with you. I think he's going to be a big move this week for a lot of people. Julie, any quick thoughts on Amon-Ra, and who's your guy?
I'm not as big on him as you are, Justin, simply because I think there's better options out there. I think I kind of believe a little more in the Reynolds situation, but that's just, maybe I'm a Los Angeles person, so I see that. I think that going into this week, because we're so close to the playoffs, I think the people, like when you're deciding between people on the waiver wire, like my tiebreakers is this person on a team that's fighting for a playoff spot? Does he have a quarterback who's going to be a little more on point and throwing more passes there? I hated to see Adam Thielen go down. I am one of the biggest lovers of Adam Thielen that is out there. I think that if you're in need of a tight end and you lost like Logan Thomas, I think Tyler Conklin is somebody that could definitely catch some passes.
Love that.
I also, if Ricky Seals-Jones is back, I had him when Logan Thomas was out, and he won me many a week. And big fan of him. So I think and it's weird because I would never really recommend tight ends because they're tight ends. But I think those are two guys because a lot of people will have lost Logan Thomas and they would have dropped anyone else that they had because they were like, he's gonna carry me through. So I think those are people to look at and just keep monitoring the injury situations on all these guys, right? Like, so
tight end love.
Yep,
Yeah.
and we've seen Ricky Seals-Jones. He was a great fill-in for Logan Thomas. He was a good streamer multiple times this season. And then love the Conklin call. He had 9 targets last game. He's had a couple games with 7 targets or 8 targets in the past. So he might need a touchdown sometimes, but at the same time, when he's seeing some target share, now is the opportunity for him and KJ Osborne in that offense.
Yeah, I thought KJ Osborne too.
Yep, KJ Osborne too.
Any thoughts, Justin, on those guys?
Yeah, KJ Osborne for me for sure is going to slot in there. He's not somebody I would just like tear up into Adam Thielen space, but if you're debating flex options, he has a good matchup. I think it's somebody definitely worth monitoring. And I love the Tyler Conklin play. He was playing well earlier in the season, and I think that opens up some red zone opportunities for him as well.
Absolutely. I'm with you guys. I'm going to drop my video tomorrow, so still got to take some notes on that sort of thing. But really appreciate you guys both coming on the show today. Real good. The connection, knock on wood, was good. We were having these weird connection issues before the show started, so I was like running downstairs, turning TVs off, and flipping phones. But this was good. Can you guys remind us where to find you, and then anything else you want to plug that maybe you have coming up this week or anything as we close the show out? We'll start with Julia again.
Yeah, just find me on Twitter. I'm on Instagram too, Julia Papworth. A lot of football and weightlifting content. So there you go.
There you go. Justin?
Yes, sir. You can find me on any social media platform, Justin Henry with the 3 instead of an E. You can find me on the Fantasy Gods making TikToks. We also have a podcast called the Gods Cast. We roll it out every Tuesday and Sunday morning to help you with the start and sits, your decisions. I know it's tough decisions right now. One quick piece, just have fun during these fantasy playoffs, man. It's not life and death. Just have fun with it.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. That's a good point. We kind of forget those things sometimes when it becomes super competitive in the playoffs, especially if there's a couple dollars on the line. But 2 great follows. They're tagged in this video. Highly recommend both of them. Thank you guys again for coming on the show. You can catch me live again on Wednesday with Kevin for our usual show and probably dropping a bunch of other random stuff on Twitter here throughout the week. So enjoy the game. Got a really, really windy, snowy vortex going on, so it might be like a 60 carry attempt sort of game for both teams. But enjoy the rest of week 13 and good luck this week coming up.
You guys too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Nick.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Bye.